Hey guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. My nickname is iFacePalm, and in this episode we're going to take a closer look at the Chinese Tier 8 WZ-111 Alpine Tiger heavy tank. And during this tank review we'll be looking into whether if it's worth the gold next time it arrives to the premium shop, how its tank statistics looks, we will compare it against other preferential matchmaking Tier 8 heavies like the IS-6 and 112 among others, and furthermore we will perform an in-depth armor profile rundown with focus on its weak spots and strengths, but also a direct comparison against the IS-6 armor. And afterwards I will take you guys alongside a recent and quite intense battle, which hopefully will give you a good idea of this tank in action. And finally I will finish up with a quick sum up and my rating of this Chinese Tier 8 tank. Okay guys, let's get started. So what is this Chinese beast and is it anything good? And furthermore, if this is the very first time you see this particular tank and wondering what this is, then do take notice that the WZ-111 Alpine Tiger has the exact same statistics as the WZ-111 but with a much cooler tank skin, at least in my opinion. Besides that, there is absolute zero difference between those two. The thing is that overall the Tier 8 preferential tanks tier strength is more like a tier 7.5 plus, because as they only can encounter tier 9 tanks, they tend to receive several nerfs to keep it balanced. This is primarily seen in their low shield penetration values, but generally just weaker figures all across the board. So for those days where Wargaming's so-called randomizer keeps getting your Tier 8 tanks seeded against Tier 10 tanks battle after battle, then this definitely can be a refreshing and viable option. So with this in mind, is this tank anything worth on the battlefield? Well, let's take a look by doing a quick stats rundown with my current crew and tank setup. The crew that I'm using for the Alpine Tiger is the crew from my WZ-111 1-4 tank, and its primary focus on brothers in arms, gun handling skills, repair skills and camouflage. For the equipment I'm using a vertical stabilizer, gun rammer and binoculars. We'll go into more details in a minute. For the ammunition I've selected 23 AP shells, which each is capable of dealing 390 alpha damage with a penetration value of 186 and a shield velocity of 800, which is not very fast. Furthermore, I've loaded this tank with 20 heat shells that in comparison are dealing a very nice average penetration of 250, but actually suffer in shield velocity and reaches only a value of 720. And last I have selected 2 high explosives. Do notice that each of the AP shells will set you back 1025, but where the premium heat shells will set you back 5600. And for the consumables I'm using a small repair kit, small first aid kit and improved combat rations. So for the stats, 390 alpha damage, 186 penetration. Yes, it's definitely not groundbreaking. This is definitely a place where you can see that this does receive preferential matchmaking, so this can definitely be a challenge with not only the very slow shield velocity but also the penetration values. The 5.9 rate of fire is decent, which means we can fire a shell every 10.1 seconds. This also means that if you do not find this tank fast enough, you can always switch the gun ram and mount a turbocharger instead, which suddenly will make this tank feel way more agile. For the gun traverse speed, 28.96, which is nothing special, and furthermore the Alpine Tiger receives a gun depression of -5 degrees, which is definitely the bare minimum a tank should have. Furthermore, it receives an aiming time of 2.51 and a dispersion of 0.38. The average damage per minute is 2317, HP pool of 1550, and for the armor itself we have values of 120, 120, 60 for the hull, and for the turret 230, 120, 60. We're going to go into more details in the armor profile rundown. The engine of 600 horsepower is capable of delivering us a horsepower per ton of 13.29, which brings this tank up to a top speed of 50 an hour and 15 reverse. The traverse speed 32.37, and for the camera values, when stationary 15 or 2.85 when firing, and when moving 8.5 and 1.61 when firing. And for the view range, the Chinese heavy tank is capable of achieving a very nice view range of 517 and a signal range of 639. For this particular tank I have chosen binoculars, and this is due to that this gun can actually hit targets from very far away. And furthermore, this tank's armor can be quite tricky to rely on. Then this setup will offer you opportunities on the battlefield at both close but long range. Out of these 3 equipments, the vertical stabilizer is a definite must, and if you are going to change one of these equipments, for example with better speed, then I would personally remove the gun rammer to add the turbo. Okay guys, let's continue with a stats comparison, and for this comparison we are comparing it against 5 other tier 8 preferential matchmaking heavy tanks, and those are the other Chinese 112, the Soviet IS-6, the American M6A2E1, the Soviet KV-5 and the French FCM50T. But do notice that the FC50T is really more like a medium tank. The only thing I can see that this has in common regarding the heavy tank is its heavy tank classification and its rather poor gun handling. So for this particular comparison, we're going to exclude it, as the FCM50T is better suited to be compared against the other Tier 8 preferential medium tanks rather than the heavy. Okay guys, so the DPM of the Alpine Tiger is 1872, which is definitely nothing out of the ordinary. Do notice that the IS-6 has a DPM of 2000, where the KV-5 boasts DPM of 2100. Furthermore, the poor penetration values all across the board, and furthermore do also notice the poor shell velocity figures that each tank has. But when changing to premium shells, then do notice that the Alpine Tiger and the 112 premium shells are heat shells, where the IS-6, M6A2E1 and KV-5 actually has APCR shells as premium, which I personally would prefer. So for the penetration values when firing premium, for the Alpine Tiger and the 112 definitely seems way better. But when looking at the shell velocity of only 720, it just fails in comparison to the way faster APCR shells that is able to achieve a speed of around 1000 or even close to 1200. And when looking at the gun handling, the aim time of 2.8 is definitely nothing out of the ordinary, which is very similar to where both the M6A2E1 and the KV-5 boast a way more impressive aim time, and furthermore dispersion values of 0.4. But when moving or traversing your tank or turret, the figure suddenly looks way better, with values of 0.2 and 0.12, where the KV-5 has definitely an advantage. But do note that the KV-5 is very slow tank, so at least the more important comparison would be the Alpine Tiger versus the 112 or IS-6, and here the Alpine Tiger just seems that much more better, with a value of 0.2 versus the 0.23. So for the gun depression, the 5 degrees gun depression is an absolute minimum that a tank should have. Both the IS-6 and 112 do receive 1 degree more of gun depression, but the king, at least in this comparison, is the M6A2E1 with an extreme gun depression of 10 degrees. And now for the mobility. So the Alpine Tiger, check this guys, 50 km an hour. The Alpine Tiger really boasts an amazing good forward speed. It really makes it possible to change flanks or to get into position upon start of the game. And furthermore, the reverse speed of 15 an hour is not groundbreaking, but every single kilometer counts here. This is also why, since the equipment 2.0 was introduced to World of Tanks, whether I should add the turbocharger on the Alpine Tiger or not, because fitting a turbocharger on this tank would make it much easier to play as a medium heavy tank. And for the power to weight ratio, 13.48, it's definitely not sluggish and in the middle of this comparison, but do notice the terrain resistance figures for the Alpine Tiger are in general much better than its Soviet or American competitors, where the 112 is very similar. And the turret traverse and tank traverse speed of 26 places it around the middle. Do notice KV-5 do have some horrible numbers, which makes it feel extremely sluggish. For the armor and health, we're going to take a closer look in the armor profile rundown in just a second. And for the last figures, in general, the camera values for each and every of these heavy tanks is nothing special. All of these tanks will have problems hiding, but the M6A2E1's figures are uniquely bad. Do notice that both the Alpine Tiger, the 112 and the M6A2E1 all receive a view range of 380, where the IS-6 and the KV-5 only boasts a view range of 350. This is very, very poor figure. And this also means that when looking at all of the statistics in this comparison, 350 meter view range is an extreme downside for the Soviet tanks, alongside the poor top speed of 35 to 40, at least when comparing against the Chinese mobility. Okay guys, let's take a look at the armor profile. Okay guys, so the Alpine Tiger armor profile. Let's switch it to the live view. And for this comparison, we'll be using the 186mm of AP shells. And directly, it looks quite amazing, right? But let's take a look. So for the turret, yes, you have two gigantic cupolas up here that are receiving values of around 180 here. Just slightly to the left, we receive values of 208 and then 345. And for the right side, 165 and around 220. The turret itself is quite well angled, which we can see here. And therefore able to achieve some insane figures, guys. Check this out. We're talking about values of 800, 700, 600, 1000. It's crazy. And this continue above the gun mantle and of course on the right side. And even when you move closer to the gun mantle, we're still achieving some impressive figures of around 300. Do notice though that the armor on the left side of the turret is actually way better versus the right side, as here you have a few areas where you only have 230mm of armor. So 250 here, 230 and 250. And furthermore, just below the gun mantle itself, there's a very little spot where you have 200mm of armor. The gun mantle itself looks really, really nice. And even the places where you have only 250mm, do keep in mind that this is spaced armor, so your shell will just disappear. We can also see that when changing to the 250mm heat shells, you just see that at the shot itself, it just disappears. Just below the turret, we have values of around 300. And as this tank has a pike nose armor, as long as it's pointed directly towards you, you are able to receive an impressive angle of nearly 60 degrees, which results in an effective armor of around 230. slightly to 200mm of armor. Just below we have effective armor of 320mm on both sides. The challenge happens when we are looking at the lower plate, which we can see is not that extreme angle, which is unfortunately only angled at around 50 degrees, which is the primary weak spot of this tank. Because do notice, with a 186mm of penetrating shells, we have around 50 to 60% chance to penetrate the lower plate. And when we try to angle it more, then we put ourselves into a dilemma, because do notice that as the lower plate armor gets better, what happens to our right side, where suddenly this whole gigantic area becomes a weak spot. And not only here, also the side itself. So as this tank has a pike nose, unless you are hull down, this can definitely be a gigantic challenge during the course of a battle. And when we change the ammunition to the 250mm penetration heat shells, then we can much easier see the weak spots and where to shoot it. And do notice now that the 250mm of penetrating shells will be able to penetrate the tank in all angle scenarios. So what about if we go hull down? Will those 5 degrees of gun depression help us out? So let's lower the turret and let's change to the heat shells. So yes, the interesting part here, those two gigantic cupolas, they are barely visible. And what suddenly happens to your armor is completely crazy. You have some fantastic values here, where as long as you can hide your lower plate, the enemy will be forced to hit you just below the gun mantle or to the right side of it. And in the heat of a battle, yes, this can indeed get very tricky. Switching back to the AP shells and looking from the side, do notice that the front part of the turret, due to its extreme armor profile, is capable of bouncing most shells' impressive effective armor values, ranging from around 300 plus to around 250mm. And this also means that if you want to be certain to penetrate this particular turret, you have to aiming for the rear part of the turret. The whole armor itself is actually quite interesting. It reminds me of some of the Russian tanks that has the special hidden compartments, because the upper part just below the turret of 163 doesn't seem that special, but just below, around 193mm. And do notice when we change to the heat shells, suddenly the effective armor due to the spaced armor can seem quite extreme. So this extra plate here, you can see it a bit more clear when we take a view from the side, and you can see there's an extra plate here with the spaced armor. If you want to penetrate this armor, you will stand best chance of penetrating them in the upper part instead of going through the flat part. You will force your shell to go through the spaced armor and hit a very well angled side. And for the lower part, we have 80mm of armor. Do notice that the track do provide an additional of 2 times 20mm of spaced armor. And when looking at the rear of the tank, as the turret is quite round, it provides you quite effective side armor, but in the center we only have values of around 60mm, and for the upper hull around 70mm, and for the lowest part 62mm. So the question whether you can side scrape this tank, well, yes and no. The pike nose unfortunately destroys this quite a lot, because even if you angle it perfectly to such a degree where they cannot shoot you through the lower plate, if you are showing the side of your hull, then your enemy is capable of penetrating you rather easily. The interesting part though is that if you shoot from a ridge line, your hull armor is capable of achieving some impressive figure around 250-260, but it needs to be so precise, so even the slightest wrong move will make you extremely easy to penetrate, especially right here through the tracks. Okay guys, so how would the armor profile look when comparing against the IS-6? Well, the IS-6 has a bit different armor profile. So we do notice directly here it's pre-angled in these locations, but the armor itself does not have a pike nose. And the biggest difference between the armor profile of the IS-6 versus the Alpine Tiger is that this tank does not really have a weak spot if you're looking directly towards the enemy, besides the two gigantic cupolas. But this also means that at any point you will have around 200mm of armor. Yes, of course you can be penetrated, and this we especially see if we're loading the 250mm of heat shells, which will go through rather easily. But then again, do notice that we're still only achieving a penetration chance of 70%, 60 and 66. So even in full YOLO mode, you can actually bounce a shell or two. And even when you try to side scrape with the IS-6, you can still see that you retain quite a lot of armor with it, which makes this tank super easy to side scrape with, as it doesn't really seem to have any gigantic weak spots. And when changing to the heat shells, yes, it's not a groundbreaking armor, but it's just above average everywhere, with some extreme exceptions. So I must say, so all in all, the IS-6 is just that much more player-friendly armor. It's that much more easy armor to use, as it just seems to pre-angle itself perfectly, and no matter how you're facing the enemy tank. And if you look at the 112, the other Chinese T8 preferential premium heavy tank, which has a very flat armor, we are directly seeing that this tank just seems that much easier to angle properly. Very interesting figures on the upper plate of around 260 to 250mm, and with the lower plate of around 200mm. And when we try to side scrape with this tank, then we suddenly see that this tank can indeed become a challenge. And even when firing the 250mm 50mm of heat shields, we are still able to achieve an effective armor for around 250. So yes, both the IS-6 and the 112 has a much easier to use armor in the majority of combat situations. And personally, because the 112 has a flat armor profile and does not have that side profile like the IS-6, it's easier for me to use because I know exactly how I'm angling the armor despite the lower profile. But for those players who like to just rush into the enemy, kill off as much as possible, bounce as many shells as you can, and worry primarily about hitting and destroying the enemy tanks, then the IS-6 in full YOLO mode is hands down the best tank, at least armor profile wise. Okay guys, let's take a look at a very recent gameplay which got quite interesting at the very end. Okay guys, so here we are on the Overlord map. I'm playing the Alpine Tiger, and for this particular matchup we are top tier. So right off the bat I'm thinking we're going to the E5 location. I like to play the Alpine Tiger more like a medium heavy tank. Because due to its lower plate, it can be quite tricky. This tank seems to fare quite well against other mediums, where 1 versus other heavies, let's say like the Defender, it seems to just be quite underpowered. Where the standard shields of 186 or even the 250 heat shields, they just barely seem to scratch some of these the other non-preferential T8 heavies. So due to its tough speed, we're able to get here fast. Can I get a shell in? Oh, nice. See if we can put in another. Yeah. Happens. Sometimes the enemy, as we just saw, they simply do not see us here. Seems to want to try to poke over. So that was 2 free shots in. We already have dealt 725 damage. This thing is, the enemy is very aggressive on our left side. Let's see if I can help him. That's a bit tricky. The 5 degrees of gun depression, it makes it very tricky to use at so many scenarios. Yeah. I think we got the second chance on this one. Okay, he got only 374 health. I should be able to one-shot him. Yeah, beautiful. 231 damage. Now he seems to get pushed from the top. That was a strange location for a heavy tank, I must admit. Okay. The T29 is pushing. Let's see if we can put a shot. Can we put a shot? Yeah. Seems not to look at me at all. Just aiming at my comrade, the T26 E4. Can we put a shot? Yeah, beautiful. Now the KV-122 is pushing from the left side. Let's see what we can do. Can we get some more targets from the right side? Usually the tanks along the left side here, they're usually very afraid to push. Can we help finishing off this guy? I can see the enemy team seems to be basically outplayed. Yeah. Okay, that of course cost me a shot in my rear here. Get away, get away. They usually got like 10 seconds of reload, so when you hit when you get unfortunately hit by a Scorpion, it's just about getting away as fast as possible. Let's see if we can help the Tiger 1 in front of us. Maybe hitting the black print. The thing is, he seems to be quite well protected over there. Oh, T77 is there. That guy unfortunately got some quite okay throat armor. The big problem here is that the Black Prince is quite well hit now. I'm not sure whether our shell will be able to penetrate from here. It's a bit more luck we need. Hit the rock. This is going to be all my comrades here. Can do a better job than I can. Can I put in a shot? At least we managed to bounce a shell. So the T77 has left us at least. Still now. Bounce another. Swirlcat has joined the fight. And 803 life left at this current stage. Okay, we better get away, yeah. The enemy tanks are just too well dig down every one of them, so be fighting pure disadvantage there, so it's just about reposition. Let's see if I can maybe get a shield on this 703, come on! Yeah. Youch. One of the shields seems to just seem to absorb, and the other one unfortunately will win. So we have only 474 health at this current stage. It's 9-9. The HP pool seems to be very similar for each team. The problem with the angling is like the gun depression is so weak, so I'll see if I can get around here and see if I can then help from long range. Because I suspect that they will soon rush in and attack my comrade here. We can just do it in time, come on. Unfortunately it's using director. Hitting with this gun, weak spot. Can I do it? Nah. Bad stuff. Fighting a bit with the gun depression here still. Absorb the shoulder. ET-15. Okay, new location. I quite enjoy that this tank is capable of repositioning itself. Not super fast, but for heavy, yeah. I like the trade-off that the Chinese tanks they tend to do, that you get a nice top speed at the cost of side armor and at the cost of... So we're gonna shield that one just a second, come on. Bad shot there, really bad shot. Should have aimed a bit more to the left. Whoa, high explosive for 61. Yes, I do like that the Chinese tank, they tend to get that extra mobility at the cost of the side armor is quite not existing, and also that the lower plate is quite weak. I'm definitely thinking about trying out some games with a turbocharger on. Yes, it will cost me the 10% extra rate of fire boost, but will definitely open up opportunity to play this tank more like a medium tank versus the current stage, because the accelerating part is not the fastest. So it's 13-11, we are capping at this current stage. The super Hellcat of them is taking quite a lot. Okay, 14-11. Oh, 14-12. Okay, so we're like 3 versus 1. Should be okay. The problem is just Black Prince is quite slow, of course. I need to get fast to the SU-100 because the Scorpion's best chance is to kill off the SU-100 before we reach him. Yeah. Okay, this is actually quite it's quite interesting because both the Black Prince and both me, we are one shot for the Scorpion, and he is way more mobile than we are. So I'm hoping a bit if I can get in shooting range. So if the Scorpion will take out the Black Prince, I can put in a Shonen Scorpion. The only problem is like I have also not 390 alpha, so it needs to be oh my. But the problem was like he has 300. I have 390 alpha, so I have to be high roll. But now I can just one shot him. So ouch. Okay, so we need just him and me. Just him and me. The problem, I have been spotted, so he knows where I am, and he certainly knows my gun depression. It's really, really weak. If I push here, I'll be dead. That's certain, that's certain. There's no way. He's trying to get a shot into me. I do not see any viable scenario here. Unless he makes the arrowhead to left. No. Push down that one. I'm thinking if I can scare him away a bit. Because he's definitely going towards me. Okay, I just need to get unspotted. I need to move to the other side, because if I just keep at this, he will just be pre-aimed at me, and sooner or later I will definitely be dead. So as he does not see me anymore, I'm expecting him to expect me on the other side. The thing is that what I will do is I will continue further down. Because for me, I need to get unspotted this stage. I'm quite certain that he will be thinking that I'll go that way, exactly. But I'm going to continue. I'm going to go to the right here. Well, it's to the left, but to the right of the mountain here. And hoping he sets up a defense spot at around G7. So at this current stage, he has the upper hand. He has a way more mobile tank than we do. And if he loads the premium shells, it should be no problem whatsoever to kill us off. Now the thing is, where did he go? A bit afraid of my gun depression, simply not good enough to... Of course, if he comes from my rear, I'm simply dead. There's no way my butt is going to penetrate it. I'm still worried about the gun depression I have of the angle. I need to move the tank a bit more to the right here, and then also hopefully being able to use those dead wrecks as a cover. Just hiding part of my butt there. And that's the thing, because I'm expecting him to probably be around here, because if we came from this angle here, because he didn't spot us here at this current stage, he would probably position himself somewhere around here, maybe, so to shoot us from both from this angle or maybe from this angle. But he could be any place on the map. It's only 2 minutes 30 seconds left. And for every second that goes, I'm getting more and more worried about my plan here. Was this the right choice? He could have gone completely down back to the K line and drive the whole way around, and then pop out from the A4 line, go past our cap zone, and then find me and then shoot me in the rear. Ooh, yes, come one shot. Yeah! Beautiful. What a game. So, the Alpine Tiger. Is it worth the gold? Well, it is quite a tricky question, to be honest, because personally I do for some strange reason enjoy this tank, and I can only put it down to the high top speed and the nice alpha damage of 390. But would I recommend to buy it from the premium shop? The thing is that if you choose any tier 8 tank to purchase from the premium shop, then no, I would not recommend buying this tank, due to the simple reason that there are so many better tanks out there. And I must say that if you are looking for a preferential matchmaking tier 8 tank, then the 112 just seems to be that much stronger, due to its way more easier to use armor profile. Yes, their gun handling is better on the Alpine Tiger, but it is still far from enough to make it precise, and the slow heat shields does definitely not make it any easier. And I must say that if you want to pick a T8 preferential heavy tank, then the IS-6 would be a better choice for most players out there, as long as you're willing to sacrifice the 30 meter base view range. But if you really want a Chinese T8 preferential heavy tank, then I do see the 112 to be overall better. So So how many facepalms would I give this Chinese Tier A WZ-111 Alpine Tiger? I will give it 1 facepalm. The view range is awesome, it has nice top speed and alpha damage, but the thing is that this is not an easy tank to play well with. And this is among others due to that it really has no hull armor, not a side armor you can trust, and the gun only seems to be able to hit anything when fully aimed. But for some crazy reason I do enjoy it, and I would guess it primarily comes down to the way it looks, as it looks simply awesome. But is it competitive? Nah, but it looks great. Okay guys, let's finish up. As always, I hope that this tank review was helpful towards your decision on whether you should purchase the Alpine Tiger next time it arrives to the premium shop. And thanks a lot for watching guys, this was my tank review number 20. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think of the Alpine Tiger in the comments below. And as always, if you like to see more crazy content from my side, feel free to leave a like or even subscribe. It's a big thumbs up for me and I appreciate it a lot. Cheers guys, take care and see you next time.